Hello there, my name is Gary Sims and this is Gary Explains. Now, a standard desktop PC is made up of several different parts. You've got the motherboard with the processor and the memory, you've got the storage, and you've also got the graphics card. Now, each of those different things can be upgraded. Now, when you upgrade the graphics card, it is sometimes a bit of a tricky process because you need to know what graphics card you should get, what kind of value you're looking for, what kind of performance you're looking at. And since some graphics cards can cost over $1,000, even more, there's not a decision that you should take lightly. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the things you need to know to help you choose your next graphics card. So if you want to find out more, please let me explain. Okay, so we're going to look at how to choose a graphics card in 2023. This will probably also apply in 2024 in terms of the general principles, or the subtitle I like to give this little video is, or how to understand all those funny numbers. What do I mean by that? Well, sometimes it seems like gamers and GPU enthusiasts are speaking some strange alien language. Should I get the GeForce RTX 4070 Ti or the RTX 2070 Super, or maybe the Radeon RX 6750 XT? So it's RTX, RX, TI, XT. What on earth are they all going on about? And if you're not an expert in this area, if you're not someone that follows all of these new announcements and all of the new things happens, it can seem quite strange. All you wanted to do was buy a graphics card for your PC so you could do some gaming better than the one that you've currently already got. Now, this is the chart we're going to be looking at quite a lot today. I've made this chart myself by taking the results from 3D Mark, running their benchmark, and then plotting it against the different graphics cards that are around. And some of the scores would be different if you use different benchmarks. If you use different games, some of these numbers might jump around a bit. This just gives you a general overview of what we're looking at. If you're looking at buying a particular card, you should really go in depth, look at some of the benchmarks from gamers and not just one thing from 3D Mark. But this is the one I'm going to use just to give us a kind of a ballpark view of what's going on. And while I was zooming this in and out, if you squint at this and look at it like this way, it looks like one of those DNA tests, doesn't it, with all the lines going up and down there. I digress. So this is the main graph we're going to look at, and the point is on the vertical here we have a single family. So this is the RTX 30 range, so RTX 3060, 3080 and so on, and you can see they're all linked up here. And then over here, for example, you might have a different range. This is the NVIDIA GTX 10 range, so the 1050, the 1070, the 1080. And this is the main point of confusion. I was trying to explain this to somebody literally only last week. It's one of the reasons why I thought to make this video. Here you've got this GTX 10 series, so there's the 10 series, the 20 series, the 30 series comes much later, but the 1080 Ti is faster than several cards in the RTX 30 range. In fact, it's faster than the RTX 4000 as well. So this is where it gets confusing. You think if you buy the latest generation or an RTX 40 series, well, that's only just come out, that's brand new. And actually you find that it's slower than something you could have bought several years ago. And this is where we're going to look at all of this to understand why this works this way. So 7 things you should know about buying a new graphics card. In this video, I'm going to cover 7 things that you should know to help you buy your next graphics card. The first thing is price. We'll definitely be looking at that. Resolution and refresh rates, space, power and cooling, the performance, VRAM, ports, and then of course NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, who should you buy? And also along the way, we're going to be covering a couple of other things like the CPU, video editing, ray tracing, DLS, and AI, and so on. Okay, so let's start with the price. New graphics cards range from anything from $40 to $1,600. Now, these are the RRP prices. So those are the prices set by the recommended retail price set by NVIDIA, by AMD. Of course, with supply issues, with scalpers, the prices can be different. We're hoping that that situation is already easing as we've got through halfway through 2023. We're hoping that's going to be better more and more as we go through the year. Never buy from a scalper. It only encourages them to keep trying to maximize their profiteering basically from people who are trying to get out. Don't do it, because that way they'll go out of business and we can return to some kind of normality. So rule number one about buying a graphics card is never spend more than you can afford or go beyond your budget. Set yourself a budget. If you've only got $50, then buy the best video card you can for $50. If you really are into high-end gaming and you're prepared to spend $1,000 or more dollars, then do that, but just set your budget and only stick to that. That is a golden rule. It's probably a golden rule for all purchases, really, whatever you're buying. But anyway, for graphics cards, never spend more money than you are able to buy. I certainly wouldn't suggest going into debt to buy a graphics card. Now, your PC is connected to a monitor. That monitor has a maximum resolution, but maybe it's a full HD monitor, maybe it's a 4K monitor, and it also has a maximum refresh rate. There's no point in buying a graphics card that outperforms your monitor. If you've had that full HD monitor for the last 2 years and you're going to keep it for the next few years, then don't buy a video card that can do more. Now, there is an argument for future-proofing your setup, so that in the future you say, well, actually, I am going to upgrade to a 4K monitor. I am going to upgrade to one with 120 Hertz refresh rate. I am going to upgrade, but I can't afford it now. But I want to buy the graphics card now that in 2 or 3 years' time I can still use it. So that is a possibility. But if you know, like me, basically, I don't like 4K monitors. Did I say that? I don't like 4K monitors. I like full HD monitors. I have 3 in my setup, all next to each other, and I like it. And I don't see the point of going to 4K. Now, I won't buy a card that's going to do 4K gaming. There's no point to it. But you might be different. You might want to go 4K across the board, multiple monitors, whatever you're going to do, 8K even. So you just think about that and make your choice based on the monitor that you've got. Now, popular monitor configurations for gaming are Full HD 1080p at 30 or 60 frames per second, 1440p at 60 frames a second, 4K at more than 60 frames a second, even 8K. Now remember, having a high frame rate on the card in the game, well, this game can play at 70 frames a second, 100 frames a second, but you've got a monitor that doesn't have that refresh rate, then you're not going to see the new frames because the GPU is generating the frames faster than the monitor can display them. And of course, NVIDIA are also saying we're now in the era of 8K gaming. So again, it really does depend on what you're watching on. The card is producing one thing, the display is something different. And again, don't make the other confusion. If you get a big display with 120 Hertz refresh rate, it doesn't mean you're seeing 120 frames a second. That depends on the graphics card. So there has to be a match-up between the display and the graphics card, and don't confuse the characteristics of either of them. Now that you know what you're going to buy because of the resolution of your monitor and the refresh rate of your monitor, you need to make sure that your PC physically can hold it. Now, of course, you may just have a NUC. I have an Intel NUC, for example, and so there's a limited amount of space you can put a graphics card in there. Maybe you've got a small form factor PC or a mini PC. If you've got a tower, you've probably got enough space without any worrying at all. Some cards are big. Here is a picture from a German website, golem.de. They just show how big an RTX 4090 is compared to the motherboard. But just look how huge that is. You're going to need some space. You're definitely going to need some space to put that in your PC. So from the RTX 4090 documentation, you must have a space of 304mm by 137mm by 61mm. One additional slot clearance in front of the fan is recommended for better airflow. So if you're kind of just squeezing into that PCI Express slot right at the end of your case and it's right touching up against the cooler to your CPU, it ain't going to work. You need space. So make sure you've got that space before you choose your graphics card. And you also need to make sure that your PC has a big enough power supply. All serious gaming cards draw more than the standard maximum of 75 watts that can be supplied via the PCI Express slot. And these cards require additional supplemental power connectors. So when you look here on your power supply, you've got these other connectors. Some, of course, go to the hard drive, some go to the motherboard, and some of them are there just to go to the graphics card. You've got to make sure that you've got that. And the kind of the typical connectors are 6-pin, 8-pin, maybe 2x8-pin, 12-pin. And so for here example, here is a card with what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pins on it. Now the good thing is if you do buy some of these cards, then NVIDIA will give you a dongle that can convert from a single 8-pin to a double 8-pin or something like that, so that you can plug it in. So you have to make sure that you have the right way to connect it, or there is a dongle. Now there is a way of using, for example, this is the connector that you might find on a hard drive, whether that's an SSD or a physical hard drive, and it converts to these 6 or 8 pin connectors here. That will be a solution. However, make sure that your power supply can still cope with it, because even though you've got the way of physically adapting to that power cable, maybe there's not enough watts in your power supply, and so you should really upgrade your power supply if you don't have the right connectors. And there are some horror stories of these cables melting under the strain. I'm sure it's to do also with the quality of the cable or where you got it from, but this is a serious power draw on your computer, so make sure you've got the right power supply. Now, in a worst case situation, you could change your power supply unit. They're not that hard to change, particularly if you have a standard kind of PC desktop or tower case. So you could do that, and then that will give you the right cables that you need for your graphics card. Now here we are back to our diagram again. Now what is the point? As I said, we're looking at individual types, series. That's the 30 series. This is the 20 series. Here's the GTX 9 series. Here's the GTX 16 series. Okay, and of course the problem we've been pointing out, and again, these numbers might be different in different benchmarks, but according to 3D Mark, the GTX 1080 Ti is faster than a whole bunch of other cards down here that are in a later generation. Now, why is that? Well, the point is that each generation is not going to be twice as fast or 3 times as fast as the previous generation. So if we look, let's go back here to NVIDIA's range, 2012, Kepler, Maxwell, these are the code names they use for the GPUs. Okay, this is the legacy ones. I'm calling the GTX 660, the GTX 750, the GTX 980. Now, they have a maximum performance depending on the card that you buy in that legacy range. Now, this is the kind of the top. So this is the maximum performance you're going to get out of that range if you buy that card. Now, interestingly, if you've got a GTX 9080 Ti, you're doing better than if you've got one of these low-end GTX 10. Why? Because the next series that came out is not twice as fast. So the Pascal came out in 2016, and yes, the top of the range one is better than the top of the range one there. But the bottom of the range one, okay, in the new series is not going to beat the top of the range in the old series, because it's not a whole 2 times, it's not up here, it's not, sorry, up here, it's not twice as high up here. You can see it's about half, isn't it? 1.5 times faster, it kind of goes up like that. Now the point is, yes, a 1050 is going to be faster than a 750 or an 850, or the 1060 is going to be better than the 960. So for the last 2 digits, trying to keep that the same in the series is going to be an improvement. So the 1080 is better than the 980, yes, but you can still have a graphics card in the older series that's the top of the range that's going to be faster than the middle or the lower of the range. And this just keeps getting repeated. In the Turing with the 2019 GPU architecture, you've actually got 2 sets of cards. You've got the 1660, which they kind of released to kind of match this area here, these ones here, and you've got the RTX range, which has got the ray tracing built into it. And as you can see, the 1660, well, it is faster than the 1060, so yes, it is faster, but there's no 1680 here, so it's not going to be faster than the 1080. Over here, the RTX 2080 is faster than the 1080. Yes, but the 2060 is also going to be faster than the 1060, but the 1080 is going to be faster than the 2060. I hope you're following that. Do you understand? It's just a shift upwards. It's not twice the power. So you're always going to get bottom of the range ones that are going to be slower than the top of the range from the previous generation. Now, obviously, as you go up and up and up and up higher, that difference is going to become less and less. So then we have the Ampere architecture from 2020. That's the RTX 30 range that I was showing here. So yes, the 3090 here, way faster than all this other stuff. I mean, look, there's nothing else on my line here to the left of that. So of course, that's absolutely fine. But right down here at the bottom, the RTX 3050, is it better than the 1650? Yes. Is it better than the 1050? Yes. But is it better than the 1080 Ti? No. So the top of the range from, this is the amazing thing, the top of the range GPU from 2016 is still faster than a bottom of the range GPU from 2020. If you can get that into your head when you're trying to understand all these numbers, it really makes life a lot easier. Now I've got a 1060 Ti, which is not on this graph, it's around about here in this little bit here. So I'm just about at the point where if I upgrade even to the lowest of the RTX range, I'm going to be doing better. And I would have to really go up to a 2070 or a 3060 or a 3060 Ti to kind of get a significant boost. But I'm just at that point where my card now is worse than the lowest of the current series. So that's why also I made this video, because I'm thinking about a GPU upgrade, and I'm just at that point. If I had bought a 1080 at the time, I bought this back in 2019, so it's been 4 years now since I bought a 1060. If I'd have bought a 1080, I would have still had another couple of more years to go, I reckon, before I would need to upgrade. But I got a 1060 Ti, so I'm just at that point to upgrade. And then we've got the Ada Lovelace, sometimes just the Lovelace GPU from 2020, and you can see that the 4090, the 4080, these are huge improvements. But the bottom of the range one, the RTX 4000, again, is still on par with this lower end stuff, and again a GTX 1080 would still be better. That doesn't have ray tracing in it. That's the one thing. Now moving over to AMD's offerings, we've got the RDNA from 2019, we've got the RDNA from 2020, got the RDNA from 2020, and they're exactly the same thing. So the 5700 XT, the 6700 XT, you can see a boost there. But if you have a 5700 XT, it's going to be faster than the 6500 XT, so the 5 and the 7 are the significant numbers here. And again, at the bottom, the RX 5500 is faster than the RX 6400. So again, it's exactly the same thing. There is a boost upwards for the same models, and in fact, these extend the models up higher. You've now got the 800 and the 950, so the 6950, the 6800, they're all going up higher. And then again, for RDNA 3, again, these ones up here, kind of in the same ballpark as the top end NVIDIA ones. Of course, there's discussions about that, about who offers the best card. And then over here on the left hand side, we've got the Intel range. These are newcomers. You've got their low end one is the Arc A380 down here, with comparable with my GTX 1080 Ti really. And then as you bump it up higher, well, yes, that's faster than what I've currently got, and the same as the top end of the RTX 20 series, mid-range of the RTX 30 series, mid-range of the RX 67 series, 6000 series, sorry, better than the 5000 series. So again, you have to see where it fits in the overall picture, but this area here is empty, isn't it? I mean, they're only over here, and we'll talk about that in a minute, in fact. So again, we could start to look at different inflection points, different data points on this graph. And again, I just emphasize this is the 3D Mark scores. If you were doing benchmark frame per second scores for a particular game, some of these numbers might bounce up and down a little bit because a particular one might have better drivers, or they might have optimized it better for a certain card or whatever, or because I know, for example, that the Arc drivers have improved over the last few months as they've improved, optimized them for the various games. But as you can see here again, this GTX 1080 Ti fits in the middle of the current 20 and 30 series. We can also see that the 16 series really wasn't that good. It's meant to fit under the RTX 2060 because it hasn't got the ray tracing, but it isn't really comparable to the top end of the previous series, and actually the top end of the legacy ones kind of, so this was a bit of a disappointment series, so it's worth looking at that. And again, just the gap difference between, let's say, the bottom RTX 40 series to the 4070 and then right up to the 40. I mean, it's just huge gains here. So you need to be aware of these different things. And again, the difference between the 5700 and the 6700 XT, again, a leap in performance. So you just need to look to see where the numbers go. And again, I've got an Arc A380, great, I've got an Arc A750, what's the difference? And you can see there's a significant difference in performance there as well. So it's worth looking at these things, and don't just assume because you've got the latest, you've got an RTX 3050, oh, that sounds good, that just came out pretty recently, it's a fairly expensive card, oh, it must be better. That, no, not necessarily. You have to learn the numbers. And of course, just pointing out this area up here, all the top end cards, very expensive. You need lots of cooling, lots of power, and they really are in a league of their own. Now, a lot of controversy, particularly recently with some big games that have come out, is about VRAM, video RAM. So it's used to hold the textures that are used during gameplay. And it's also, sometimes there are several different layers of textures that are in there because they're using different techniques to kind of sandwich them together to give you lighting and shadows and also the actual textures themselves. Some quite complicated rasterization process. Of course, you've also got ray tracing going on in there. And so some games are now asking for more and more VRAM, and you can almost get to the point where you've got more VRAM in your video card than you've got in your CPU and your main RAM. Now, I'm about to give you some ballpark figures. These are to be taken with a pinch of salt. You really do need to check that the games that you're playing or the types of game that you're playing. If you're playing solitaire, well, you probably shouldn't even be buying a 3D graphics card. But I mean, you understand what I'm saying. If you're buying these games that really are just trying to get maximum fidelity in the gaming, then you're going to need to notice this. But a rule of thumb: 6 gigs of VRAM for 1080p, 8 gigs of VRAM for 4040p, 10 gigabytes or more for 4K. Always, as I say, that affects the price of the card you're buying. So think about what types of games you're playing and whether you're going to need that amount of VRAM for the resolution, the refresh rate that you're playing at. As I said, every game is different, so check the particular specs of the games that you are playing. Okay, one quick thing to mention in passing. It's obvious maybe to some, but it's worth checking. On the back of the card, there are different display ports that connect to the monitor. And so here is a card. It's got 3 display ports on 1 HDMI. So those are the display port ones. Here's the HDMI one. And so you need to check if you have a multiple monitor setup. I said I have 3 monitors, and funnily enough, one is a display port, one is a HDMI, and one is a DVI. So the graphics card I have at the time, and it says here legacy cards might also include DVI or VGA. So my 1060 Ti had those. Now if I were to upgrade, I have to think about my monitors. I'm going to have to change one of my monitors or use an adapter from something DisplayPort to DVI or HDMI to DVI or something like that, or DisplayPort to HDMI. So I'm just going to have to make sure that I've got the right thing. Now, a lot of the adapters work well, particularly between DisplayPort and HDMI and DVI. In fact, VGA, of course, being an analog signal, is more troublesome. The other one's a digital signal, so the conversion tends to be, the adapters tend to be a lot simpler and work a lot better. Just something to note. What you'll do, if you've got 1 monitor, and then you'll probably be fine. But when you're like me, you've got 3 monitors, I need to think about, oh, if I upgrade my graphics card, I have to change a monitor as well because I can't connect to it. So just something to think about. Okay, and so then we get to the big question: NVIDIA versus AMD versus Intel. Now, NVIDIA and AMD are the big dogs. They're the ones that have been around for a long time. Intel is new to discrete GPUs. Of course, in their motherboards, they've got lots of built-in GPUs that come inside of the processor on the motherboard, so that you can kind of just plug it in, and in a mini PC, a NUC, you've got all the built-in graphics, but they're not the big gamers like they are. But with their new Arc series, they have entered into the arena. And basically, there are some people that are NVIDIA fans, there are some people that are AMD fans, some people are cheering Intel along in this new venture of discrete graphics. And as with all fandoms, people are going to fight tooth and nail. They're going to really argue their case, and I'm not going to get into that. If you're an NVIDIA fan, absolutely fine. I've just said I've got an NVIDIA 1060. I bought that mainly because of price and performance at the time, and also because I do video editing, which I will mention in a minute. Maybe you're a Radeon fan, and people are saying price and performance today for Radeon is better. So I'm not going to get into that. If you're a fan of a particular make, well, that's fine by me. You go ahead and buy the card that you want. Now, price is certainly a factor at the moment, and maybe, for example, the AMD cards are more reasonably priced at the moment. This is something you have to consider when you choose. Maybe in 6 months' time that will be different. Maybe in a year's time that will be different. We don't know. But price is certainly a factor, and therefore price performance is certainly a factor. Some of these cards are very expensive for what they offer. Is it worth paying that much? Is it better to get one from alternative from AMD rather than NVIDIA, or NVIDIA rather than AMD? You have to look at the pricing and the performance yourself and see which side you like. Now, Linux fans, to be honest, like AMD more because their drivers are certainly more transparent, more open source, and NVIDIA, although they have released, in quotes, an open source driver, and I've got a video about it here on this channel, still Linux fans favour AMD more. And make your choice and buy one you can always change your mind next time. So if I bought a 1060 Ti, I come now in 2019, what am I going to buy next time? Well, maybe I'll buy an AMD. These are part of the questions. You're not tied into an ecosystem, not like if you buy, an iPhone and then you try to change to Android. That can be a bit tricky. You're tied into the ecosystem, not so much with graphics cards. Now, I did say I'd mention things like CPU, video editing, ray tracing, and so on. So it matters what CPU you use with your GPU. But that is a different subject, but you can't put an RTX 4090 in a dual-core Pentium system. So you've got to have the right CPU to go with it, because you're not going to get your 4K gaming, you're not going to get your 100 frames a second or 80 frames a second if you don't have the corresponding CPU. However, it doesn't mean you have to have the best CPU. There are videos you can watch on YouTube of people using relatively old systems, maybe 6th generation i3 or i5 systems, and they're sticking in a RTX card in it, and they're showing you the performance they get. So it's worth checking in that. So you don't necessarily have to have the latest greatest i9 at the highest unlocked clock speed. You can do it with lesser CPUs, but again, check the minimum CPU recommendations of the games that you are playing, and also check out YouTube videos that show you the performance of different CPU and GPU combinations. Now, creators have a different set of criteria than gamers, so I picked NVIDIA because the editing software I use works better with NVIDIA graphics cards, and in that case the number of CUDA cores has a real difference, and also whether it's got built-in hardware encoding for H.264, H.265, AV1 nowadays. These are some of the things you may want to look into. So, for example, the ARC systems have AV1 encoders in them. Some of the RTX systems, the 20 and 30 series, I think don't have AV1 encoders, but they do have decoders. So you need to choose, if you're a creator, you need to choose maybe on a different criteria than you would if you were a gamer. If you want ray tracing, then check the games that you play, see which cards they support, see which cards do better for the ray tracing. And so you've got the RTX 2030, you've got the higher AMD series, they support ray tracing as well, so you need to check that. The same for the upscaling. So with the upscaling from both NVIDIA and from AMD, the graphics card produces less fidelity and then uses an upscaling technology to fill in the gaps, as it were, fill in the blocky bits, and you get better pictures, but you get a better frame rate. Again, you need to see which games support that. And if you're into machine learning anyway, if you do want to develop your machine learning skills, then NVIDIA really is the only choice. The AMD is not really the best option. If you're going to dive into machine learning, make sure you get an NVIDIA card and get as many CUDA cores as you can. Okay, so here's my last word on the subject. Buy what works for you within your budget that fits your PC, that is appropriate for your CPU and fulfills your gaming, VR, AI or video editing needs. Don't try and buy something that someone else has bought because they actually happen to have $2,000 of spare change. They've got the latest CPU. They play all their games in 4K at who knows what frame rate, when in fact you only play a couple of hours at the weekend when you've got some time and you don't need that, or you don't have the money. You just want to do the best you can with the budget you've got. So don't be tempted to go too far. Buy what works for you and be happy in the gaming or the AI or the video editing that you are able to do. Okay, that's it. That's my look at the 7 things you need to know to upgrade your graphics card. Please do tell me in the comments below if you have any other suggestions that viewers of this video might want to take into account, or maybe tell us what is your current favourite graphics card, not only for performance, but also for price for performance, for the value of that card. Okay, that's it. I'll see you in the next one.